I didn't go looking for the Jersey Devil. That's the first lie everyone tells when they survive something like this. That they were chasing it, hunting it, proving it. The truth is uglier and more human. I went into the Pine Barrens because I thought I was smarter than the people who warned me. I thought folklore was something that happened to other people in older centuries, back when the world still had dark corners. I believed modern roads, GPS, and cell towers had domesticated fear. I was wrong. I need you to understand who I was before I stepped into those woods, because the forest doesn't just react to where you are, it reacts to who you think you are. Confidence smells loud out there, arrogance even louder. I was researching American folklore professionally, or at least that's how I justified it. Writing, documenting, tracing myths back to their psychological roots. Wendigo hunger psychosis, Mothman mass hysteria, and precognitive trauma. Black Hollow as composite of mining disasters and collective guilt. Patterns, always patterns. Every legend I believed was just a mirror held up to human fear. The Jersey Devil was supposed to be easy. New Jersey folklore felt most embarrassing compared to Appalachia or the deep Southwest. Pine trees, sand, colonial superstitions, nothing that would survive 3 centuries of development. I had already read the accounts, mother leads, the cursed 13th child, wings, hooves, a scream like metal tearing. I'd highlighted inconsistencies, underlined exaggerations. I had a notebook full of margins that said things like likely animal misidentification and early American moral panic. That notebook didn't make it out of the pines. The idea was simple. Spend 3 nights in the Pine Barrens, hike deep enough to remove road noise, document environmental conditions, interview locals beforehand, then come back with a grounded, modern retelling. Demystify the myth without mocking it, respectful skepticism. That was my brand. The first warning came before I ever reached the forest. It came from a gas station clerk on Route 72, the kind of place where the lights hum louder than the refrigerators and the coffee tastes like it remembers being hot. I was filling up when he noticed my map, a real one, unfolded, seized from use. He stared at it longer than politeness allows. "You camping?" he asked. "Research," I said, smiling the way academics smile when they think they're disarming people. He didn't smile back. He leaned over the counter, squinted at the map, and tapped a finger on a section I'd circled in red. Deep pines, far from marked trails. "You don't want to sleep there." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't dramatic. It was tired, like he'd said it before and hated that it never worked. I told him I'd be fine, that I'd camped in worse places, that I had supplies, satellite GPS, emergency beacons. I used words like redundancy and risk mitigation. He nodded slowly, the way adults nod at children who don't understand consequences yet. "People always think the pines are woods," he said. "They ain't. There's space between things." I laughed. I hate that I laughed. When I asked him what he meant, he straightened up, rang up my purchase, and said, "Sun goes down early out there. Don't follow sounds. Don't whistle back. And if you hear something walking behind you that don't match your steps." He stopped himself. Then he slid my receipt across the counter and said, "Just don't." That was it. No Jersey Devil, no monster. Just don't. I drove on anyway. The Pine Barrens don't announce themselves. There's no dramatic threshold, no moment where the trees suddenly thicken and the air turns cinematic. 1 mile you're passing houses, mailboxes, strip malls. The next, the road narrows, the trees lean closer, and the horizon feels unfinished, like the world stopped rendering properly. Sand replaces soil, pale, dry, deceptively soft. Pine needles carpet everything, muting sound. Even my boots felt quieter, like the ground was swallowing noise on purpose. I parked where the road gave up, pretending to go anywhere. No signs, no barriers, just an unspoken understanding that if you drove further, it would be your fault. The air smelled different immediately. Not fresh, not rotten, neutral, stripped, like the scent had been filtered out. I checked my GPS. Strong signal. Compass steady. Sun still high. I stepped in. Forests usually greet you with sound, birds, insects, leaves shifting. The pine barrens greeted me with absence. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was selective, like someone had decided what noises were allowed and which ones weren't. I walked for hours, following a bearing I'd chosen deliberately off trail. Trails mean history. I wanted untouched ground. That should have been my second warning. The arrogance of wanting untouched anything in a place that old. As daylight thinned, the forest began doing something subtle that I didn't notice until much later. It began correcting me. Every time I adjusted my direction slightly, compensating for uneven ground or fallen branches, the terrain seemed to push back, not physically, but narratively. Paths opened where I hadn't intended to go. Clearings appeared too conveniently. Landmarks repeated. A twisted pine with a lightning scar showed up 3 times in 2 hours, each time from a different approach angle. I told myself it was coincidence, pattern-seeking behavior. The brain hates randomness. I set up camp before dusk, not deep enough to be reckless, I thought, far enough to be meaningful. A small clearing with low brush, good visibility, no immediate deadfall. I marked my coordinates, checked my signal again, still solid. That night, the forest exhaled, not wind, not weather, an actual release of pressure, like a held breath finally let go. The temperature dropped fast, but not evenly. Cold moved in pockets, sliding between tier trees, brushing past my ankles, my wrists. I could feel it move. I cooked quietly, ate quietly, wrote notes by headlamp. At some point, I realized I hadn't heard an animal since sundown. No owls, no raccoons, no insects. Nothing hunts in total silence unless it doesn't need to. I laughed it off again. I hate that about myself. Then I heard the footsteps. They weren't loud, they weren't close, they were considerate, matching my pace as I shifted in my camp chair, stopping when I stopped, starting when I moved, too measured to be an animal, too patient to be a person lost and panicking. I called out, standard protocol, identify yourself, let wildlife know you are human. My voice sounded wrong out there, thinner, flatter, like it had less permission to exist. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time stretches strangely when you're listening too hard. I convinced myself it was gone. That's when I heard it breath, not behind me, above me, in the trees, slow, controlled, curious. I didn't look up. I didn't know why I didn't look up, but something deep and old inside me, older than logic, older than pride, told me that seeing it too early would cost me something I wasn't ready to pay. I sat perfectly still until the breathing faded, not retreating, not approaching, just withdrawing, like attention being removed. I didn't sleep that night. Morning came reluctantly, light seeping through the pines like it had to ask permission first. Birds returned one by one, tentative, testing the air. My GPS still worked. My compass still pointed north. Everything said I was safe, everything except the forest. When I packed up camp, I found footprints at the edge of the clearing, cloven, pointing toward my camp. But deeper impressions, heavier, older, pointed away, backward, as if whatever made them had been facing me while walking in the opposite direction, studying. That was the moment I should have left. Instead, I wrote in my notebook, possible hoax, local prank, psychological priming. I crossed out psychological priming, and I walked deeper into the pine barrens, because I didn't understand yet. The Jersey Devil doesn't chase you, it lets you come to it. If the forest was the first warning, the people were the second. I wish I could say I ignored them because they were dramatic or uneducated or superstitious. That would make this easier to explain. The truth is worse. I listened carefully and still chose not to believe them because belief would have required me to change my plan. And I wasn't ready to do that. I came out of the pines late morning, just long enough to resupply water, batteries, protein bars, a fresh notebook. I told myself it was procedural. Smart research meant pacing, not bravado. In reality, I needed to be around other humans for a few hours to reset whatever unease had crawled into my chest overnight. The town didn't have a name that mattered. Most Pine Barrens towns don't. They're identified by what they used to be: a mill town, a bog iron shop, a cranberry settlement that failed. This one looked like it survived a war on habit alone. Two diners, a bait shop, a volunteer firehouse with paint peeling like dead skin. I went into the diner because diners talk. The bell over the door rang once, sharp enough to cut conversation. Every head turned, not curiosity, an assessment. I looked like what I was, an outsider who thought maps mattered more than memory. I took a booth near the window. Coffee arrived without me ordering it. They should have been comforting. It wasn't. The waitress was in her late 50s, maybe older, with the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime bracing herself. She looked at my boots, still dusted with pine sand, then at the notebook on the table. "You're in the woods," she said. Not a question. "I was," I replied, going back in. That's when the room changed. Not dramatically. No gasps, no silence, just a subtle withdrawal, like everyone leaned half an inch away from my table without realizing it. "You camping?" she said. "Research," I said again. Same word, same mistake. She set the coffee down harder than necessary. "Research, don't sleep out there." Before I could respond, a man from the counter turned around on his stool. He was broad, old in the way manual labor ages people unevenly. One eye cloudy, the other sharp enough to hurt. "You go past the cedar bog?" he asked. "Yes, I did. Camped just beyond it." His jaw tightened. "That ain't camping ground." "I didn't see any markers. That's the point." He slid off the stool and came closer, resting his hands on the back of the booth across me. He smelled like oil and pine sap. "You hear it yet?" he asked. "Hear what?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked around the diner first, like checking who was listening, not to him, but to us. "Sounds that don't fit," he said finally. "Steps that wait for you. Breathing where breathing shouldn't be." The waitress crossed herself, quite automatic. I felt a flicker of vindication, confirmation bias, shared hallucination narratives, folklore propagation in isolated communities. All the boxes were checking themselves. "I heard animals," I said carefully. The man smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Animals don't wait." A woman from a corner booth spoke up then. I hadn't noticed her before, which in hindsight was strange. She was small, wrapped in a coat too heavy for the season, hands folded tight like she was holding something invisible. "My brother went missing in '94, she said. "State said exposure, search dogs, won't go past a certain line, just sat down, whined, refused." She looked directly at me. "He was found 3 days later, alive, walking." That caught me off guard. "Walking?" She nodded. "Barefoot, no injuries, didn't know where he'd been." "What happened to him?" She hesitated. "He stopped sleeping, stopped eating meat, started mirroring doorways everywhere he went." "For what?" She swallowed. "Clearance." The diner was quiet now, not tense, resigned. I should have left. That would have been the smart version of this story. The one where I pack up, publish a cautious article about living folklore, and move on. But there was a problem. None of them were trying to scare me. Fear sells, drama exaggerates. These people weren't exaggerating, they were editing, choosing words carefully, omitting details, protecting something fragile and dangerous. That kind of restraint doesn't come from fantasy. I asked about the Jersey Devil directly. That was another mistake. The waitress stiffened. The man with the bad eye shook his head slowly. The woman in the corner closed her eyes. "We don't name it like that," the man said. "That's a newspaper name, cartoon name. So what do you call it?" He leaned closer, lowered his voice. "We don't." I pressed anyway, asked about Mother Leeds, the 13th child, wings, hooves, screams. "That's the nursery version," the waitress said, "for outsiders. Keeps you focused on the wrong thing. What's the right thing?" She refilled my coffee without asking. "It's not what it looks like. It's what it does to space." That word again, space. I asked them to explain. They didn't all speak at once. They took turns, correcting each other, filling gaps, shaping something that felt more like a memory than a story. They said the pines fold, that distance lies, that you can walk straight and arrive behind yourself, that some nights sound travels faster than light, and other nights it doesn't travel at all. They said the thing in the forest doesn't stalk bodies, it stalks attention, that it notices when you start noticing it, that curiosity is louder than fear. "You go looking for it," the man said. "You're already wrong." "I'm not looking for it," I replied. The woman in the corner laughed softly. It was the saddest sound I heard all day. "You went back in," she said. "That's looking." I paid my bill and stood up. My hands were shaking, which annoyed me more than it scared me. I told myself it was caffeine. At the door, the waitress touched my arm. "Sun sets faster your second night," she said. "It learns you." I asked what she meant. She let go and looked past me, out toward the trees barely visible beyond the road. "Everything does." Outside, my phone buzzed, GPS recalibrating, signal flickering. I checked the map. The coordinates from my campsite had shifted. Not much, just enough to be wrong. I drove back toward the pines anyway, because here's the thing, no one tells you about warnings. They don't stop you. They just make sure you can never say you weren't told. By the time the trees swallowed the road again, I realized something else. No one had told me how to survive the Jersey Devil. They had only told me how people fail, and that meant whatever was waiting for me didn't care about strength or weapons or preparation. It cared about understanding. I stepped back into the forest, carrying their words like a debt I didn't know how to pay. Behind me, the town disappeared. In front of me, the Pine Barrens felt closer than before, like it had leaned in. There's a moment, always, when survival is still possible. It's not dramatic. There's no scream, no shadow stepping into your path. It's quiet, ordinary, easy to dismiss. That's why it works. That's why the forest uses it. For me, it came less than an hour after I re-entered the Pine Barrens. The light was different this time. Same sun, same sky, but the brightness felt thinner, stretched, like it had traveled farther than it should have to reach the ground. Shadows didn't sit where I expected them to. They leaned, they overlapped. Sometimes they lagged behind the objects casting them. I noticed that, wrote it down even, but I explained it away as fatigue, poor sleep, heightened alertness. The brain, when tired, starts narrating reality instead of observing it. That was my excuse. The forest didn't rush me. It never does. Rushing is for predators that need to eat. Whatever lives in the pine doesn't need to hurry. It has time the way mountains have time. I followed my GPS bearing again, deliberately choosing a route that should have intersected my previous path within 40 minutes. I wanted to prove the diner stories wrong, prove the coordinates were stable, prove that yesterday's disorientation had been first night nerves. The pines responded by coming cooperative. Too cooperative. The ground leveled out, brush thinned, fallen trees formed natural walkways. Every obstacle seemed to solve itself just before it became inconvenient. I remember thinking how kind the terrain felt and immediately hating myself for using that word. Forests are not kind, they're different at best. That was the first sign. The second was sound. My footsteps stopped echoing, not gradually, not subtly. One step echoed, soft crunch of sand and needle, the next didn't. It was like someone had turned off a channel. I stomped harder, nothing. The ground absorbed everything. I stopped walking. No wind, no birds, no insects. Then from somewhere ahead of me, I heard my own footsteps resume. Same pace, same rhythm, slightly delayed. I stood perfectly still, heart thudding loud enough I was sure it could be heard. The steps ahead stopped too. I told myself it was auditory pareidolia, the brain replaying familiar sounds under stress. There were papers written about this, studies, explanations that sound alright, sounds airtight in classrooms and useless in forests. To test it, I took one deliberate step backward. The sound ahead took a step forward. That was the third sign. I didn't run, I didn't panic. I did what rational people do when reality threatens their framework. I minimized it. I said out loud, okay, just that, like acknowledging a mild inconvenience. I altered my route slightly, veering east. The forest adjusted with me. Paths opened, landmarks shifted. That lightning-scarred pine appeared again, closer this time. Its bark peeled back like exposed muscle. I put my hand on it. It was warm, not sun-warmed, internally warm, like something alive beneath the bark was circulating blood. I pulled my hand back fast enough to scrape skin. The tree didn't react. It didn't need to. That's when the smell started. Copper, whetstone, something animal and old. It wasn't everywhere. It moved in waves, drifting past me in pockets, then vanishing. Each time it returned, it lingered longer. I checked my GPS again. Signal strong, coordinates wrong, not random wrong, not drifting. They had snapped to a fixed point that I knew intellectually I was not standing in. According to my device, I was half a mile west of where my eyes and legs insisted I was. I recalibrated, reset, switched devices, same result. That's when a thought surfaced that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Stop checking. You're being rude. I froze. People underestimate how terrifying an uninvited thought is. Not fear, not imagination. A sentence, fully formed, carrying intention but no emotion. I laughed again, too loud, too sharp. Get a grip, I told myself, and that's when I saw the tape. Bright orange surveyor's tape, tied loosely around a low branch ahead of me. Fresh, clean, artificial. A human marker in a forest that hated them. Relief flooded me so fast it made my knees weak. Someone else had been here recently. Proof of normality, proof of process, proof that this place still obeyed rules. I followed it. Another length of tape appeared 50 yards later, then another, each one leading me deeper, always just within sight of the last. Breadcrumbs. I didn't question why a survey would be happening in unmarked territory. I didn't ask why the tape never fluttered in the breeze. I didn't consider that it was guiding me away from every known trail. I followed it because it wanted to be followed. That realization didn't come until later. The forest thickened as the light thinned. Afternoon slid toward evening faster than it should have. My watch disagreed with the sky. According to time, I had hours. According to instinct, I had minutes. The tape ended abruptly at a clearing I had not seen on any map. The ground there was bare, no needles, no sand, no growth, just packed earth, dark and smooth like it had been pressed flat by something heavy over a long period of time. At the center of the clearing were the remains of a fire pit, cold, old, carefully dismantled, and around it, etched into the dirt, were footprints, dozens of them, cloven, backward facing, overlapping in tight circles as if someone had paced there repeatedly, waiting, studying. I felt watched again, but stronger now. Not curiosity, assessment. The air pressed in, not physically, spatially. Distances collapsed. The trees felt closer without moving. The sky narrowed overhead. I became acutely aware of my own proportions, shoulder width, head height, the clearance between branches and ground. The memory of the woman in the diner mirroring doorways slammed into my curiosity with sudden clarity. Clearance. Something moved at the edge of the clearing, not fast, not hidden. It stepped into view with the confidence of something that knows you can't do anything about it. At first, my brain refused to assemble it as a whole. It catalogued pieces instead. Legs bent the wrong way, a torso too thin for its height, skin stretched tight, dark and matte like burned leather, wings folded neatly along its back, not bat wings, not bird wings, something heavier, jointed wrong. Then the head lowered, horse-like, but stripped of softness, bone structured visible beneath skin, eyes set too forward, glowing faintly, not red, reflective, like they were borrowing light. It didn't roar, it didn't scream, it inhaled. The sound was deep, controlled, intimate, like it was breathing me in. I could move, not fear paralysis, something else, a suspension, like gravity had been adjusted locally. It tilted its head and smiled, not a snarl, not a threat display, recognition. I understood then, without words, that this was not our first meeting. The footsteps from the night before, the breathing in the trees, the kindness of the terrain, it had been with me since I entered the pines, letting me believe I was alone. I took one slow step forward. The ground did not compress beneath it. That's when my body finally rebelled. I turned and ran, not blindly, not screaming, running with the cold, precise knowledge that weather rules governed pursuit here were not human. Behind me, I heard nothing. No chase, no crash through brush, just my own breath, and occasionally, impossibly, footsteps, matching mine, ahead of me. I don't remember stopping. One moment I was running, lungs burning, legs cutting through brush that clawed at me like it had opinions, and the next I was standing still, hands braced on my knees, breath tearing out of my chest in ragged pulse. The forest around me looked identical to every other stretch of the pine barrens, and that terrified me more than the thing I had seen. No clearing, no marker tape, no sign of the place where I had just been. It was like the forest had swallowed the memory of it whole. I checked my watch, caught into it. I had been running for 3 minutes. My body disagreed, my legs shook, my throat tasted like blood. Sweat chilled instantly on my skin as the temperature dropped again, not with the natural slide of evening, but with the deliberate, localized cold that wrapped around me like damp cloth. The sun was still visible through the trees, but it felt late. That's something people don't talk about much, the difference between time and lateness. Time is measured, lateness is felt, and I was in late in a way that had nothing to do with clocks. I forced myself to slow down. Panic feeds the wrong instincts. If the thing in the clearing wanted to chase me, it could have. The fact that it didn't meant something else was happening. I was being repositioned. The forest had stopped pretending to be neutral. The first sound that changed wasn't dramatic. It was the wind. Wind in the pines normally moves like a whisper, sliding through needles in long, even waves. This time it stuttered, started and stopped, changed direction mid breath. It felt less like weather and more like someone testing different acoustics. I stood still and listened. The forest began speaking in layers. Far away, I heard what might have been an owl, but the call repeated too evenly, too perfectly spaced. No bird maintains rhythm that precisely. Beneath that, there was a low rustling that didn't correspond to any movement I could see. Leaves whispered where nothing touched them. Branches cracked without swaying. Then came the sound that made my stomach drop. My name, not spoken, shaped. The ear moved in a way that resembled my name being formed, without sound fully committing to it, like breath passing over a word it hadn't learned yet. I clamped my jaw shut to keep from answering. There's a reflex, deeply human, to respond when you hear your name. It's older than language. It's how parents find children in the dark. The pines knew that. I remembered the gas station clerk's words then: don't follow sounds. That advice made sense now in a way it hadn't before. Sounds weren't indicators here, they were invitations. The light shifted again, not dimmer, narrower, like the visible world had been cropped. Peripheral vision stopped offering usual information. Everything outside my direct focus blurred, not optically, but contextually, like the forest had decided what I was allowed to pay attention to. That's when I realized I was no longer hearing my own footsteps. I was walking. I could feel it. Weight transfer, muscle tension, impact. But sound, nothing. The ground had taken it again. Instead, footsteps appeared elsewhere, sometimes behind me, sometimes to the side, once unmistakably, directly in front of me. Measured, heavy, confident. I stopped. The steps in front of me stopped too. We stood there, facing each other through trees and space and rules I didn't understand, neither of us visible. The silence stretched, then something else joined it. A scream. High-pitched, elongated, tearing itself out of a throat that wasn't built for it. It echoed through the pines in a way that made distance meaningless. It could have been a mile away or 6 feet. The sound carried emotion but no direction. Pain, rage, and something else beneath it. Practice. I dropped to one knee without thinking, palms pressed to the sand. The vibration from the scream traveled through the ground, into my bones. It wasn't just heard, it was transmitted. The scream stopped abruptly, too abruptly. No fade, no echo, just gone. The forest waited. That was when the smells changed again. Copper returned, stronger now, mixed with damp fur, old smoke, and something sore, like meat left too long in heat, but cleaned carefully afterward. My stomach revolted. I gagged, barely keeping control. I told myself I had to make camp. That was a rational decision. Darkness was coming. Movement was compromised. Panic was expensive. Shelter meant control. I chose a spot quickly, too quickly, driven by urgency rather than judgment. A cluster of low pines formed a rough enclosure. Visibility was poor, but wind was blocked. I told myself it would do. I told myself a lot of things. As I worked, the forest began doing something deeply unsettling. It started imitating me. When I snapped a branch, a snap answered back, not immediately, but after a pause just long enough to feel intentional. When I zipped my bag, fabric rasped somewhere to my left. When I cleared my throat, something mimicked the motion without producing sound. I was no longer alone in my actions. I was being mirrored. I stopped everything and stood still. The forest stopped too, except for breathing. Not close, not far, everywhere. I don't know how long I stood like that. Minutes, maybe longer. My muscles screamed. Sweat cooled and then chilled me to the core. Then, slowly, deliberately, something changed its pace. The breathing began syncing with mine. Inhale, inhale, exhale, exhale. It wasn't copying me, it was correcting me. I broke the rhythm by holding my breath. The forest held its breath too. That's when fear finally broke through whatever restraint my mind had been clinging to. Not panic, not yet, but the realization that I was no longer interacting with an environment. I was interacting with an intelligence. Night fell without ceremony. No gradual dimming, no golden hour. One moment there was filtered light. The next, darkness settled like a lid. I turned on my headlamp. The beam cut a clean cone through the black, but the edges felt wrong, too sharp, like the darkness outside the light was denser than it should be. The beam caught movement, high up. Branches swayed where nothing should have been heavy enough to move them. Shadows slid against shadows. Once, just once, the light caught the underside of something folded and textured, skin stretched between elongated bones. A wing. The headlamp flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. I laughed then, a short, broken sound that startled even me. It wasn't humor, it was disbelief curdling into hysteria. "This isn't happening," I whispered. The forest whispered back, not words, agreement. That was when I heard the steps approach from behind me, slow, heavy, deliberate, each one placed carefully as if to be heard without being rushed. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The steps stopped directly behind me, close enough that I could feel displaced air, close enough to smell it fully now. Copper, fur, old smoke, and something else, something human, like breath that had passed through human lungs once, long ago, and never forgotten the shape. It leaned in, not touching, just close enough, and then, very softly, with perfect clarity, it spoke, not my name, a sentence. "You came back." The voice was wrong, not monstrous, not distorted, patient, certain, like a thing stating a fact it had always known would be true. I closed my eyes, and in that darkness, deeper than the night around me, I understood something terrible. The Jersey Devil wasn't introducing itself, it was confirming a choice I had already made. I don't know how long I stood there with my eyes closed. Time had stopped behaving normally hours ago. Seconds stretched, minutes folded in on themselves. When I finally opened my eyes, the darkness hadn't changed, but I had. Something inside me had shifted from denial into a colder, heavier state. Acceptance is not calm. Acceptance is weight. The thing behind me had stepped away. I didn't hear it go. I didn't hear anything go. The forest had returned to that dense, expectant silence, the kind that doesn't mean absence, only restraint. I forced myself to sit, not because it felt safe, but because standing felt like surrendering ground I did understand. Sitting was a claim, however small, a way of saying I'm still here on purpose. My hands were shaken as I reached for my notebook. I almost laughed at that. The instinct to document in the face of something that clearly did not care about records. But writing has always been my way of anchoring reality. If I could put words down, maybe I could keep myself from dissolving into whatever rules governed this place. The page stared back at me, blank and accusatory. What do you write when folklore stops being folklore? I started with history, not the clean, tourist-friendly version, not the mother leads, nursery tale with its moral warnings and dramatic birth. I wrote what the diner people had implied, not said. The gaps between their words, the parts they avoided. The Pine Barrens are older than New Jersey, older than colonies, older than the stories written about them. Before Europeans arrived, the Lenape people lived around these forests, not in them. That distinction matters. They hunted near the pines, traveled around them, used the edges, but they didn't settle deep inside. Their stories didn't describe the forest as cursed or evil, they described it as occupied, a boundary place, a thinning, a place where rules overlap and sometimes fail. The thing later called the Jersey Devil wasn't described as a monster, it was described as a consequence, something born when boundaries are violated, when a role is created incorrectly or incompletely, a guardian that wasn't finished right. When Europeans arrived, they brought different rules with them: ownership, land division, permanence. They cut paths where paths weren't meant to exist, built homes where homes didn't belong. They named places without asking what already lived there. And then came the Leeds family. The historical record is fragmented, intentionally so. Daniel Leeds was a publisher, an occultist, a political outcast. He printed almanacs filled with astrological symbols and esoteric commentary that unsettled his neighbors. He argued publicly with religious authorities. He refused to submit his worldview to theirs. In another time, he would have been ignored. In a boundary place, he became dangerous. Mother Leeds, if that was ever her name, gave birth to 13 children. 13 in a culture obsessed with divine order. 13 in a household already marked as deviant. But here's the detail that never makes it into popular retellings. The 13th child was expected, not feared, not cursed, prepared for. There are references, half-erased journal entries, second-hand church records that suggest the birth was meant to fix something, that the child was intended to serve a role the forest demanded, a warden, a seal, something to keep the boundary intact as settlement pressed closer. But something went wrong. Whether it was the ritual, the intention, the timing, or the sheer arrogance of thinking humans could assign purpose to a force they didn't understand, the result was a being that existed between categories. Not spirit, not animal, not human. Aware, unfinished. The scream associated with the Jersey Devil wasn't rage. It was disorientation. A thing born knowing it should be something else. I stopped writing when my headlamp flickered again. Once, twice, then held. The forest around me felt closer than ever, not physically, existentially, like history itself had leaned in, curious whether I was finally listening. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. The ground beneath me wasn't random. The pine needles weren't scattered naturally. They were thinned in places, pressed flat in others. Subtle pathways radiated outward from my campsite, barely visible, like pressure marks left over time. Something had been coming here for a long time. I wasn't the first to sit where I was sitting. That realization made my mouth go dry. I thought about the footprints in the clearing, the circles, the pacing, the waiting. This wasn't hunting ground, it was a meeting place. I remembered the voice behind me. You came back. Not accusation, recognition. I was here because I fit. That thought terrified me more than any monster could have. A sound broke the silence, low, rhythmic, almost mechanical. At first I thought it was my heart. It wasn't. It is coming from the trees. Thump, pause, thump, pause. Heavy impacts, spaced evenly like something large shifting its weight deliberately from one leg to another. I turned slowly, headlamp beam sweeping the trunks. Nothing. But the sound continued, now accompanied by another layer, a faint scraping, like claws or hooves dragging lightly through sand. I realized then that the Jersey Devil didn't move the way animals move. It repositioned, as if space were something it could step through rather than across. My notebook slid from my lap. When I bent to pick it up, The sound stopped. The forest held still. I straightened. The sound resumed. Closer now. Thump. Pause. Thump. I whispered, "Why?" The word barely left my mouth. The answer didn't come as sound. It came as understanding, because I had crossed the boundary willingly, because I had returned, because curiosity is a form of invitation, and I had been allowed with it. I thought about all the people who disappear in national parks, the ones found miles from where logic says they should be, the ones who survive and can't explain where they were. The pines don't take everyone, they take the ones who notice. The thumping stopped directly in front of me. The air displaced again, heavier, closer than before. I didn't look up, I already knew what would be there. Instead, I spoke. Not bravely, not defiantly, but honestly. "I didn't know," I said. The forest seemed to consider that. Then the voice returned, not behind me this time, but everywhere at once, resonating through trunks and ground and breath. "Now you do." Something brushed past my shoulder, not touching, mirroring, clearance. I understood then that the history wasn't just something to be learned. It was something to be continued, and whatever role had gone wrong in 1735 was still unresolved, still waiting, still adjusting the world around it, trying to make room for something it had never become. I sat there through the rest of the night, listening to the forest rearrange itself around me, knowing with growing certainty that survival wasn't about escape anymore. It was about whether the pines would decide I was necessary. Morning didn't arrive. That was the first thing I noticed when my eyes finally burned themselves open. No birds announcing light, no gradual thinning of darkness, just a subtle lessening of pressure, like the forest had loosened its grip by a fraction. My watch said 6:12 a.m. The sky said nothing. The pines were trapped in a gray state that didn't belong to any hour. Light without warmth, visibility without clarity. I could see, but nothing felt revealed. Shapes stayed provisional, like they might change their minds. I stood slowly, joints stiff, muscles aching as if I'd been holding myself together all night by force alone. The clearing around me looked undistributed. No broken branches, no crushed undergrowth, except for the ground. That's where the truth waited. The footprints had multiplied. They weren't fresh, not exactly, but they were clearer than before, pressed deep into the sand and needle mat like the earth itself had leaned up to meet them. Dozens at first glance, hundreds when I forced myself to really look. They formed patterns now, not random pacing, not circles, lines. Paths that began at the tree line, crossed the clearing and stopped inches from where I'd been sitting, where I was. Every single one faced backward. The toes pointed away from me, the heels pointed toward me, as if whatever made them had approached me while walking in the opposite direction, as if it never turned its back. I crouched to examine one closely, ignoring the screaming protest from every instinct I had left. The shape was unmistakable, cloven, elongated, asymmetrical. The left and right impressions didn't match perfectly, suggesting weight shift, not limping but deliberation. There weren't tracks left in transit. They were tracks left while standing, holding position, watching. A memory surfaced uninvited, the man in the diner saying, "Animals don't wait." This wasn't waiting, this was attendance. I stood up too fast and the world tilted, not from dizziness but from spatial disagreement. The trees slid slightly out of alignment, trunks not quite where my eyes expected them to be. It corrected itself after a second, but the message was clear. I was no longer the primary reference point here. I packed my gear quickly, hands moving on muscle memory alone. Staying longer felt like volunteering. Movement, even blind movement, felt safer than stasis. I chose a direction and started walking. No compass, no GPS. Those tools had become decorative. I moved slowly, deliberately, placing each foot with care, listening for sound. The forest gave me nothing back. No echo, no resistance, just that same swallowed silence. After 10 minutes, or what felt like 10 minutes, I realized something else was wrong. My footprints were gone, not fading, gone. I stopped and turned around. The sand behind me was smooth, undisturbed, like I'd been lifted and set down rather than walking through it. But ahead of me, impossibly, a new set of prints appeared, cloven, backward. They matched my pace exactly. I didn't breathe for a long time. The implications hit slowly, like cold seeping into bone. It wasn't following me, it was projecting me, showing me where it was willing to let me go. I whispered, "No." The forest didn't respond. I kept walking. The terrain began repeating itself again. The lightning scarred pine, the shallow depression filled with darker sand, a fallen trunk split clean down the middle. Each time I encountered them, they were closer together, like the space between memories shrinking. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop hard enough to hurt. A boot print, human, fresh, facing the right way. I ran to it, relief surging so violently it felt like pain. Another person, another presence, proof I wasn't alone in a way that mattered. Then I noticed the size, too small, and the spacing, irregular, dragged slightly. The print led forward, then stopped abruptly, mid-stride. No disturbance beyond it. No scuff, no fall, no continuation, just absence. I followed the line slowly, heart pounding, eyes scanning for anything that could explain it. 10 yards ahead, I found the rest. Clothing, folded neatly. A jacket, a shirt, pants, arranged with care at the base of a tree. Not tears, no blood, no sign of struggle. The shoes were placed side by side, toes pointing toward the trunk. I recognized the brand. They were the same boots I wore, same size, same wear pattern. My throat closed. This wasn't a kill site, it was a demonstration. Something moved above me, a heavy shift through branches that didn't break. I tilted my head up slowly. High in the trees, just beyond where the light thinned into uselessness, I saw the outline of it. Not fully, never fully, a suggestion of shape, limbs folded wrong, wings tucked tight, head angled downward, watching. It didn't descend, it didn't threaten, it waited. That's when I understood the footprints. Why they faced backward, why it never turned its back. This wasn't about pursuit, it was about orientation. The Jersey Devil didn't move toward people. It arranged itself so people moved toward the wrong future. I stepped away from the folded clothes. The forest shifted in response, branches creaking, ground tightening, space narrowing. A choice was being offered: continue walking and become what had been demonstrated, or stop. Stopping felt like failure. Stopping felt like kneeling. I did it anyway. I sat down hard in the sand and said out loud, with no dignity left, "I won't." The word echoed once. That terrified me more than silence. The forest listened. The pressure increased, like gravity dialed up locally. My shoulders stacked. My breath shortened. The air thickened until each inhale felt like pulling something through syrup. Then the voice returned, not everywhere this time, directly in front of me. "You already did." The shape above shifted slightly, adjusting its position in the branches, measuring clearance. I understood then that the forest wasn't deciding whether to kill me. It was deciding whether to keep me, and that was far worse.